Today we will be considering whether or not it is more cost-effective for a company to make or buy a component in their manufacturing process. A company called Ellison Enterprises manufactures headphones. Historically, the company has manufactured the ear cover component to their headphones, which has the following product costs, totaling to $40 per unit. Recently, a supplier has approached Ellison Enterprises and has offered to sell them the ear covers for $35 each. Is it wise for the company to buy the covers from the supplier, or are they better off making the covers themselves? At first glance, it may look very straightforward. It costs the company $40 to make the covers, and they can buy them for $35 each. So of course, they should buy the covers. But this type of thinking overlooks the overhead costs, which almost always contain fixed costs that won't go away if the company stops producing units. So the logical question is, how much of the $20 of overhead costs are fixed and how much are variable? Let's assume that 90% of the overhead costs are fixed. This means we can break up the overhead per unit into its fixed and variable components. The fixed component is 90% of the $20 per unit cost, which comes to $18. The variable component is the remaining $2, or 10% of the total overhead costs. The $18 of fixed overhead per unit would still be incurred even if the company decided to outsource the ear cover production to its suppliers. Because this $18 is incurred in both scenarios, we don't need to include it in our analysis. Also note that the fixed and variable overheads add up to the total overhead per unit of $20. Now we are properly prepared to compare the two scenarios. If the company makes the ear covers, they will have $15 in direct material cost per unit, $5 of direct labor per unit, and $2 of variable overhead per unit. Of course, under the buy scenario, there are no manufacturing costs, but we do have the $35 cost to purchase the units. The total cost to make the ear covers is therefore $22 if we only consider the variable costs, compared to the $35 cost to buy the ear covers. When breaking up the analysis this way, it becomes clear that the company should not buy the ear covers, as it would cost them $13 more per unit. Now, there are a few considerations other than simply cost that a company should examine when deciding whether or not to make or buy a component in their manufacturing process. It could be the case that the supplier's component is not as high quality as the component that the company can manufacture themselves. Buying the component makes the company dependent on suppliers, which for a variety of reasons they might want to avoid. Suppliers might change their prices in the future, or they might go out of business, or their delivery times might be inconsistent. All of these things need to be taken into consideration when a company decides whether or not to make or buy a component in their manufacturing process.